Good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us here on the Nitty Gritty Cafe or NGC on Instagram. If you're on YouTube when you're listening to this, Learn Together is the name of the channel. So today we are talking about some things your children should see in your marriage. So let's get into it. So we call this more lessons are caught than taught. Your children should see that you cherish and care for each other. They should see you resolving conflict, prioritizing each other, sharing the load of work, and negotiating well together, how to argue well, because we know arguments will come, but you also need to solve them together. So if you're going to argue in front of the children, then your children should see you negotiating and solving those problems together in a very calm way so they can know that their problems don't need to be solved by yelling and screaming, that you can sit together, you can sometimes compromise because you might have to meet in the middle in order for these arguments or conflicts to be solved. So they're looking at your marriage, and sure, you might say something to your children. You may say, oh, give your sister or brother a hug, make sure you're nice, but they're actually watching you and what you do with your spouse. So if you're telling the children be nice to each other, but you're not being nice to your spouse, the issue will be that when they grow up, a lot of these lessons you think you're teaching will not be the ones that they've learned. They will actually look at your life, your marriage, how you treated your spouse, how you treated other people, and sometimes that's what they will emulate. So more lessons are caught than taught. It's not what you say, it's more what you do. And yes, they will remember some of what you say, but more likely than not, they will do more of what you did. So, what I'm saying is, you need to make sure that you are reflecting onto your children what it is you would like them to emulate as they grow older. So, they should see how you act, what you say, and how you show your emotions. And I know this may be a tough one for some people. We don't like others seeing us cry. We don't like other people seeing us show any emotions or anger. And that will also teach your children. So if you never showed emotions or your parents didn't, chances are you think it's a weakness to show emotions because that's what you've learned from watching your parents. So let your children know that there are times when you have to be vulnerable. Now there's a time and a place, but there are times when you should be vulnerable with your spouse. You should be able to go and cry on your spouse's shoulder and have conversations about the difficult things. So make sure that you're doing that. You should try your best to be an example of who you want your children to grow up to be. So if you don't want your children to grow up and be angry, then you should show that example. If you want your children to grow up and be loving, then you need to be the example of what loving looks like. So more lessons are caught than taught. I want you to remember that from today. All right, so both of you should be working through problems together. So I'm giving a few examples. I found this image online and I thought this would be really good. So conflict resolution, this is something that a lot of us may not have been taught growing up. So when we fight or argue, as we like to say, you shouldn't be calling each other names that are not their name. So, don't call somebody a derogatory name. Yelling, I myself don't enjoy yelling. I don't like people yelling at me, and I try not to yell at others. So, no yelling. Um, and don't walk away while others are talking. Listen to the end. And some of the conflict resolutions that we have here, it says you need to effectively convey information, be sensitive to people's feelings, be polite, avoid gossiping, accurately interpreting people's emotions. So if you don't understand what is being said, paraphrase, ask, is this what you mean? So when you say this, is this what you mean? Because sometimes we hear something and we interpret it, but it's not what the other person is trying to say. So ask questions and calmly come to resolutions. So I found, I've been married for more than 15 years. So I found that if I speak to my spouse, in a voice that sounds like I'm angry, there's less chance that he will listen to what I have to say. But if I'm calm and I lay things out, you know, number one, this is what I'm feeling. What's your response? And I talk in a way where he feels respected and that I'm listening to what he's saying, that we get to the resolution way faster than if I go in, as they would say, with all guns blazing, where I'm angry and I'm yelling, or vice versa. So, together, come to a resolution. Let your children see you doing that. If your children ever see you arguing, make sure that they see you make up. Make sure they see that you have come to a resolution to that conflict. Call the children together and say, hey, maybe mommy and daddy were yelling this morning. We're sorry you had to hear that. But we have solved this issue and we want you to know that we've come to a resolution, and you don't need to yell in order to solve things, but have that conversation with your children. Don't let them think you're consistently mad at each other, because that can also produce insecurity in children. So you want them to know that everything is okay, you've solved that problem, and now we're moving on together. And once again, show versus tell. It's the same thing as more lessons are caught than taught. One of the greatest lessons you can teach your children from your healthy marriage is that of shared responsibilities. So, one of the things that boys versus girls will learn at home normally is that there are certain things that boys do, certain things girls do. And that's okay if that's the way you want to raise your children. But what I'm trying to say here is that all the responsibility for everything in the household shouldn't rest on one person. We should know, okay, mommy does this, daddy does this, and we don't say we're going to do it and not do it. Children should also have responsibilities around the home when they get to a certain age, whether it's going to be helping to dust or, sweep the floor, because they need to learn that. So when they grow up, they don't expect someone to serve them hand and foot, is what we like to say. They know that I need to help out with things around the house. I need to make sure my spouse is not feeling overwhelmed with all the things that needs to be done around the home. I did another um, recording about that. You can have a look at that one. Should children help around the house? We did one about that. So show that you are also taking responsibility for what you need to do around the house, whether or not it's cutting the grass, wiping the floors, making the beds, whatever it is, that both of you have responsibilities and you take them seriously. So you're not leaving it for the other person to pick up after you because you feel like being lazy. You're not, leaving everything for one person to do around the home, because then your children see that. It's not something you're, telling them, okay, you should make sure you don't do what you're supposed to do, but you're showing them that that's okay, and they will learn that lesson, which is not a lesson you want them to learn. So, we're almost at the end here. You should still be, so in your marriage, 10 years on, well, 5 years on, 20 years on, 30 years on, you should still be affectionate towards each other. You should still be dating each other. You should still have fun together. And both of you should do what you say you will, which I just talked about. All of these things, and I just did a couple examples, will teach your children that, you're not just affectionate to each other at the beginning of your marriage. 30 years later, you still love each other. You're still crazy about each other. You hug just because, you smile just because, you dance around the house just because. Be affectionate. And I'll do another series because there's different types of affection. There's physical affection, emotional affection, spiritual affection. So we'll do another one on that at a later date. You should still be dating each other. And I'm not talking about spending hundreds of dollars to go, do whatever. If you have that money, that's fine. But you should always be taking time for each other, because that will teach your children that when they get married, this is something we should expect. We should expect that we would go on dates, that we will enjoy our time together, that I will receive affection. Because what happens is, if you're not affectionate towards your spouse, and I know sometimes it's hard, or you don't feel like you have time, but if you're not affectionate, either the child will learn I don't need to be affectionate, or I shouldn't expect affection from my spouse. So these are the things that we need to make sure that we're thinking about. You should still have fun together. So if you don't have fun in your marriage, or your children don't see you laughing together, doing things together, enjoying your time together, they will think marriage is boring. And we know that the statistics say less people are getting married right now, because people say, it's just a paper, people get divorced, people don't have fun anymore, that kind of stuff. You don't want that. You want your children to see that, hey, 30 years on, we still have the most fun together. We still love each other and like each other. We love each other's company. And both of you should do what you say you're going to do. So your children can expect when they grow up and get married that their spouse will do what they say they will, or they themselves should expect of themselves that they will do what they say they will. Because that can be a real stumbling block in your marriage if you're making promises and never fulfilling them. So make sure that you are doing what you say you will. All right, so that was some of the things that I thought you should know, or that your children should see in your marriage. There are many other things, but I thought I would start out with these today. You know what, everyone? Have a fantastic day. Thank you for joining me.